Hi, Nicholas here. Welcome to my YouTube channel at Nicholas Bugash. I recently read that 93% of shooters use only factory ammo. Some have the idea that there are few choices in factory 444 Marlin loads. Now, while it's true that you may not find lots of 444 ammo on the shelf at your local shop, you can order it from big gun shops or from the producers and have it shipped directly to your home in 3 to 5 days. You don't even have to drive anywhere to get it. I'm going to take two 444 Marlin rifles to the range and shoot 7 factory loads through each of them. The loads include some that are useful for medium game, like antelope and deer, and some that are meant for big game, like elk, moose, and bears. I'll report my chronographed muzzle velocity for each of the loads fired through 2 barrel lengths, calculated kinetic energy values out to 200 yards, their 3-shot group sizes, and calculated recoil energy. Let's get started. I fired loads on 3 days. These are baseline groups, shot with one of my hand loads. The grid is 1 inch square. I get groups of 8/10 to 1.1 inches with this load when everything is right. I struggled with windy conditions with swirling gusts of 16 miles per hour on 2 of the days. I tried to shoot when wind flagging at my target showed it was still, but some shots still showed what I think was lateral dispersion from the wind. Under ideal conditions, group sizes could be reduced by half. I adjusted the groups I thought were affected by wind to compensate for that, and an asterisk after the group's measurement denotes that. I'll present the rifle used, the load, measured muzzle velocity, calculated kinetic energy out to 200 yards, calculated recoil, measured groups, and any notes at the bottom of each page. Video of each load being fired gives you a sense of the recoil they produce. A trajectory graph for the load out to 200 yards based on the measured muzzle velocity will show its trajectory when sighted 2 inches high at 100 yards, and an outline around the zone 2 inches above and below the line of sight will show the maximum range to which shots will stay within that zone. The range that the load delivers a minimum 1,500 foot-pounds on target for big game and 1,000 foot-pounds for medium game will also be marked when possible. Now, a note about reported velocities from the manufacturers. They're usually from test barrels of 24 inches length. Actual rifles vary from that. So here we're using a 22-inch and a 20-inch barrel, so you can see the difference in energy and velocity and trajectory. If you're using a 16-inch barrel or an 18-inch barrel, you need to be aware of that. Underwood's 220 grain extreme penetrator load uses an all copper bullet with an unusual machine nose pattern that they claim produces tissue disruption similar to an expanding bullet, but it retains its shape, allowing deep penetration. It's the lightest bullet in this comparison, but its length is similar to the heavier cord lead 265 grain Hornady flat point and 300 grain Hornady XDP to its right, providing a higher ballistic coefficient. 2 shots in 1 1/4 inches demonstrate its accuracy potential. The trajectory of this load kept its bullet within the plus or minus 2-inch zone to about 195 yards and maintained big game kinetic energy to about 190 yards, with sufficient energy for medium game well past 200 yards. Now, I have no experience using this bullet on game. This load's velocity and energy at 163 yards is comparable to a 30-06 220 grain load at 220 yards, which is proven capable of big game. Another way to consider its capability is to ask, can a half ounce of metal traveling about 1,200 miles per hour be deadly when striking big game? This was the only load that had a failure to fire. 1 cartridge out of the 20 would not fire after 2 hammer blows. The 220 grain extreme penetrator load demonstrated good accuracy in the R95, placing 2 or 3 shots on the windy day in 1/2 inch center to center. Notice that you can see the 4 sides of the bullet's nose shape in its target holes. The maximum range in the trajectory vital zone dropped to about 187 yards with the shorter barrel, and it delivers
big game kinetic energy to about 163 yards, with medium game energy still well past 200 yards. I found 2 user reviews on Midway USA's website. One fellow reported the bullet passing through both shoulders on a 300-pound black bear. An Alaskan user wrote that it is the best bear round he's used in the 444. He dropped a medium-sized brown bear at 75 yards, and I estimate his gun would deliver 1,750 foot-pounds of energy at that range. And he reported that the penetration and killing power is beyond anything I've ever seen for this gun. And it is also very accurate in my 444P model. Remington's 240 grain jacketed soft point is the load the 444 was introduced with. It produced good accuracy. The bullet stayed in the 4-inch trajectory zone to about 170 yards. Now, when introduced, it delivered big game smash to about 125 yards and medium game energy to about 200 yards with the 24-inch barrel of the original Marlin rifle. Shorter barrels have reduced its range by about 25 yards. It produces the least recoil of any of the tested loads. Remington's 240 grain load also shot well on the R95. This load's performance for trajectory and big game and medium game energy delivery was not noticeably changed by the 1 3/4 shorter barrel. Remington sent me these images from their 100-yard ballistic gelatin bullet testing showing 1.9 times expansion and 98% weight retention after 18 inches of penetration.
Yeah.
Hornady's 265 grain FTX load did not give exceptional accuracy in my 444 SS on this windy day. The cartridge has a polymer tip bullet with a higher ballistic coefficient that is intended to extend its range and flatten its trajectory. The bullet's shape requires that the case is trimmed shorter, which reduces its powder capacity. The flat point load in the standard length case had 86 feet per second greater muzzle velocity. Comparing trajectories and delivered energy shows that the FTX bullet stays in the 4-inch zone to about 180 yards and delivers the big game 1,500 foot-pounds of energy about 10 yards farther than the flat point load, with a small decrease of about 3% in recoil. The FTX load gave good windy day accuracy on the R95. The shorter barrel gave up about 10 yards in 4-inch zone trajectory and energy compared to the 444 SS. I haven't used this bullet. User reports frequently mention immediate expansion, large wound cavities, and having less penetration than soft point bullets, sometimes not exiting on thin-skinned game. Hornady's 265 grain superformance load in the 444 SS promised the accuracy I've gotten in hand loads despite the crosswind. Its shorter flat point bullet in the full length case gave higher velocity than the FTX load and kept the bullet in the 4-inch trajectory zone to about 177 yards and maintained big game kinetic energy to the same distance. This hand-loaded 265 grain interlock bullet took a whitetail doe with an approximately 35-yard rear quartering shot. The bullet shattered the femur, expanded to 0.77 inches, and passed through the vitals, delivering 25 inches of penetration before stopping at the front quarter of the deer. The deer dropped at the shot, struggled to its feet, wobbled a few steps, and expired. The R95 also showed the typically good accuracy potential of this super performance load on this windy day. The R95 shorter barrel allowed hits in the 4-inch trajectory zone to about 175 yards and reduced the load's effective big game range by about 10 yards. Still possesses energy for deer and antelope way beyond 200 yards. Hornady introduced the 265 grain flat point interlock bullet and designed it specifically for the 444 Marlin a few years after the rifle was introduced, and it has successfully taken all North American big game. It is a proven bullet. Buffalo Bore's 300 grain jacketed soft point load yielded very good accuracy in my 444 SS with 2 shots in 3/4 of an inch center to center. The load keeps the bullet in the 4-inch vital zone out to 175 yards and delivers big game energy a bit further to 179 yards. That's 79 yards farther than the original 240 grain 444 load. Now this load is very similar to a hand load that I used for many years with a discontinued Barnes original 300 grain bullet. Barnes recommended that bullet for big game, but not for deer. They recommended their 250 grain for deer. I like the 300 grains performance on deer because its heavier construction still provided clean kills with full penetration and minimal meat loss. That said, I don't know which bullet Buffalo Bore is using in this load. The R95 produced as good or better accuracy with this load. Its range decreased by about 20 yards with the shorter barrel, staying in the 4-inch zone to 165 yards and providing big game smash almost as far to 160 yards. Medium game energy is well beyond 200 yards. Many 444 Marlin shooters proclaim the accuracy and knockdown power of heavy cast lead bullet loads. Underwood's 335 grain cast flat nose gas check bullet load put 2 shots in 1.5 inches, but didn't group as well in my 444S as the jacketed bullets. Its lesser accuracy in my 444 SS was likely because the bullet's as size diameter is a couple of thousandths of an inch too small for my Marlin's barrel. Underwood's 335 grain bullet stayed in the 4-inch zone to about 163 yards and delivered big game smash to 200 yards. Recoil takes a jump up with the heavier bullet. Underwood's 335 grain cast bullet load gave better accuracy in the R95. It stayed in the 4-inch zone as far as with the longer barreled 444 SS and still met the big game energy goal to 195 yards. Many users of the 18-inch barreled 444P Marlins love heavier cast bullet loads, and this preservation of downrange energy with the shorter barrel is probably one reason they do. Buffalo Bore's 335 grain lead flat nose gas check load did not produce good accuracy in my 444 SS, similar to Underwood's cast bullet load. This is not a reflection of the cartridge itself, but of the cartridge and rifle combination, as discussed in detail in my 444 SS and R95 comparison video. My 444 SS has a groove diameter of 430, which works very well with jacketed bullets, but cast bullet shooters have found 1 to 2 thousandths larger produces great cast bullet accuracy in these rifles. The bullet stayed within the 4-inch trajectory zone to about 165 yards and delivered big game energy to about 200 yards. As with the Underwood cast bullet load, Buffalo Bore's cast bullet load shot better in my R95's barrel with its thousandths smaller groove diameter. Both rifles have a 1 38-inch twist and micro groove rifling, so contrary to popular myths, those factors do not determine cast bullet accuracy, but the bore's groove diameter does. The bullet stayed within the 4-inch zone to about 160 yards and delivered big game energy to about 190 yards. I would expect cast bullet size 1,000th larger in the R95 and 2 thousandths larger in my 444 SS to deliver the accuracy cast bullet shooters claim and provide great energy delivery and penetration out to 200 yards. And note that the recoil is about 5% greater in the heavier 444 SS and 10% greater in the lighter R95 with all these 335 grain loads as compared to the 300 grain loads. We've collected a lot of information about these 7 loads. How to decide which one we want? Here's one way. I consider the load characteristics that are important to me. Accuracy. It doesn't matter how powerful the cartridge is if you don't hit a vital area. Trajectory. How easy is it to hit in the 4-inch vital zone? Maximum range for big game kinetic energy at target. Can we penetrate to the vitals if we hit a lot of tissue and bone first? Bullet sectional density as an indicator of penetration potential. Recoil, as it affects recovery if a second shot is needed, and the potential to introduce involuntary flinching. Loading and cycling, the ease of rifle operation in the field. Are we going to drop a load out of the tree stand or search for it in the snow? I divided the range of values into 4 groups. If accuracy ranged from 1 to 5 inches center to center, then the first group would be 1 to 2 inches, and so on. I considered the first 4 characteristics the most important to me and gave them twice the value of the last 2. Then I summed all the values to get an objective scoring of the cartridges based on what I consider important. The scores are plotted in a graph on the right. The graph shows the results of the 7 cartridges in my 444 SS based on my big game criteria. You might add a characteristic, have different priorities, or assign different values to a characteristic to arrive at different scores. For example, the Remington 240 grain load that ranked lowest in my criteria for big game could rank much higher if I changed the criteria for medium game, because in my rifle it has power for medium game to 175 yards, is accurate, has a relatively flat trajectory, and has the least recoil of any of the loads. Remember, this is based on the performance of these cartridges in my rifle. The 335 grain loads did not have good accuracy in my 444 SS, and they lost points because of that, but they might shoot very well in another rifle and rank much higher. Here are my results for the same 7 cartridges fired through my R95. Note that the 265 grain FTX bullet ranked tops in the R95, while the 265 grain superformance scored first in my 444 SS, demonstrating that every rifle has a different personality. The all-copper 220 grain extreme penetrator load ranks second in both rifles. Because the 444 Marlin has demonstrated better big game performance over the years with heavier bullets compared to the original 240 grain load, I was surprised to see the lighter 220 grain load rank so well. But it's apples to oranges comparing all copper to copper and lead construction. All the heavier bullet loads ranked within a point or two in the R95, which shot the 335 grain loads better. But the jacketed bullet loads work better in my 444 SS. In my 444 SS and R95 comparison video, I reported that 3 kinds of cartridges wouldn't pass through my R95's loading gate. I still had that trouble at the range when making this video and loaded those cartridges singly when shooting. After returning from the range, I disassembled the R95's magazine tube, and I noted that the edge of the orange plastic magazine follower that covers the magazine spring in the tube had a slight molding burr that could have been keeping it from sliding forward easily. I chamfered that edge using a file and then emery cloth, and I can now load 3 cartridges of all 7 loads through the R95's loading gate and into the magazine tube, and they cycle properly through the action. It still requires a lot of pushing to get those 3 loads through the loading gate, whereas on my Marlin they just slide in. So far I've worked about 100 rounds through the R95's loading gate, and this may get smoother with more use and a little polishing.
Reviewing all these results, consider that many hunters have successfully used the original 240 grain loads on big game since it was introduced over 60 years ago. But the newer, heavier loads offer greater big game performance. I hope you find this information useful for sorting out which loads might best meet your needs, whether for medium game or big game. When you use the 444 Marlin at the short to medium ranges for which it is designed, you'll be very happy with its game harvesting knockdown. The 444 Marlin cartridge and lever action rifles are American hunting classics. Contact Marlin and ask them to make new 444 rifles. And please subscribe to my YouTube channel to get my other videos, and hand loads and hunting experiences are in the works.